When your own child says you're not welcome, it's a pain words can't describe. My wife had been hiding something from our son, a sickness she kept quiet about. All she wanted was to protect his joy on his big day. But when he told us not to come, the day of the wedding came, but we weren't there. I watched my wife grow weaker, her hands trembling as she stared at the clock. No call. No seat. Just silence. It broke her more than the illness ever could. In this story, I share the heartbreaking moment my son told me and his mother to stay out of his marriage, the very boy we raised with love, now shutting us out. If you've ever felt rejected by your own blood, this story will touch your soul. Please subscribe and like my videos to join my family and share in our experience. Also tell me where you are watching from. Back to my story. Those were his exact words, words I never thought I'd hear from the boy I raised. Stay out of my marriage. Just like that. Cold. Final. Like we were strangers. They say a father's pride is in his children. And it's true, I've always carried my son like a crown upon my head. Watched him grow from a restless toddler with skin knees into a man with broad shoulders and big dreams. He was my pride. My joy. My miracle. So, when he told us he was getting married, I was filled with nothing but happiness. My wife, God rest her, she clapped her hands with joy. She started talking about outfits and colors and calling her friends. She said it was finally her time to dance at her own son's wedding. But not every joy comes without a shadow. One evening, he came home. Not for long, he stood by the door, like he didn't want to sit. Said he didn't have much time, but he needed to talk. His voice sounded rehearsed. And his eyes, those same eyes I used to look into when teaching him how to tie his shoelaces, wouldn't meet mine. Then he said it. Dad. Mum. I need to ask you not to come to the wedding. At first, I thought he was joking. I let out a soft laugh. My wife blinked, confused. But he didn't smile. His face was hard. There's been too much tension, he said. Between the families. Between traditions. It's better for everyone if you both just sit this one out. My wife gripped my hand. I could feel her pulse, fast, like a scared bird in a cage. I tried to keep my voice calm. She asked him if we had done something wrong. If maybe we offended his fiance's people or made a mistake we didn't know about. He shook his head. It's not that, he said. We just want a fresh start. Clean. No drama. It's our decision. Our decision. Funny thing about those words, our decision, when the people who raised you are left out of it entirely. My wife said nothing that night. She just stood up, walked to the kitchen, and started boiling water she didn't need. I watched her back, slightly bent from age, but still strong. Stronger than I was in that moment. I looked at my son and said, "All right." He looked surprised. Maybe he thought I'd argue. Or shout. Or throw something. But I just nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I knew that trying to force myself into his life would only push him further. He left a few minutes later. Said he hoped we understood. And then, he was gone. My wife didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. She sat on the edge of the bed, whispering prayers that didn't have words. I knew something was wrong with her. I'd been noticing it for months. The weight loss. The dizzy spells. But she brushed it off every time I brought it up. Now I understand why. She was holding it all in, the pain in her body and the pain in her heart. All because she didn't want to burden him. She said, let him enjoy his wedding. I'll tell him after. But that night, her eyes lost a little light. And me. I sat in the living room and stared at the framed photo of us as a young family when he was still small enough to sit on my lap and call me his hero. Funny how quickly heroes become unwanted. That was the beginning of everything that followed: pain, loss, and lessons no father should ever have to learn. But this was just the first chapter. You see, my wife, God bless her soul, she had a quiet strength. The kind that didn't show itself through loud speeches or angry words, but through silent endurance. Through sacrifice. Through love that held its breath. After our son told us to stay away from his wedding, she didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't say one harsh word. She just stood up, kissed his forehead, and said, "Congratulations, my son." I watched her walk into the kitchen to fix him a plate, even after what he'd said. That's who she was. Even when her heart was breaking, her hands still served. But I knew something else was going on, something deeper than just hurt feelings. She'd been tired lately. Real tired. She'd go up the stairs and have to sit halfway, clutching her chest. Her appetite had disappeared. And sometimes when I looked at her, really looked at her, her eyes weren't just tired. They were fighting something. I asked her once, straight out, if she was okay. She said, "I'm just getting old, my darling." That's all. But I knew my wife. I knew when she was hiding something. Still, I didn't press. Maybe I didn't want to hear what I already feared. A few days after the wedding rejection, I found her sitting in the bedroom with a journal open on her lap. She was writing, slowly, like her hand was struggling to keep up with her thoughts. I asked what it was. She looked up at me and smiled that same tired smile. "It's for him," she said. "In case I don't get the chance to tell him in person." That's when it hit me. She wasn't planning for a conversation. She was preparing for goodbye. She was sick. Really sick. But she hadn't told him. She didn't want to ruin his wedding. She wanted him to enjoy his big day without the dark cloud of her illness hanging over it. He's waited so long for this joy, she told me one night. Let him have it, even if it costs me. And that's when I realized something. A mother's love is the most dangerous kind of love, because it will burn itself to keep others warm. She planned to tell him after the wedding. She said, "I'll call him when he returns from his honeymoon. I'll tell him then. I just don't want this news to stain his happiness." But what she didn't realize was that heartbreak doesn't wait for the right moment. And sometimes, the things we try to protect our children from are the very things that destroy us in silence. That night, I sat beside her and we held hands in the dark, not saying much, just breathing. Just being. Just aching in the quiet. She said, "He's still our son." And I said, "Yes. But I wish he knew how much you're still his mother." That was the last full week I spent with her. The last week she was still strong enough to sit up and talk and write in that little journal. And deep down, I think we both knew. Time was running out. The wedding day came. No invitation. No phone call. No second thoughts. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before dawn. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching my wife sleep. Her breathing was light, shallow. Her face pale. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and her hands trembled even when she poured tea. She stirred around 6 a.m., opened her eyes, and whispered, "Today's the day." I nodded. We didn't say much else. What was there to say? The boy we raised was getting married, and we were no longer part of that chapter of his life. I had planned to go for a walk, just to clear my head, but I stayed. We both stayed. We sat in the living room, dressed neatly, not because we were going anywhere, but because it felt wrong to look unkempt on such a day. She wore her best wrapper. The one she had bought months ago with plans to wear to the wedding. She even tied her headscarf the way she always did for special events. But now, she wore it like armor. I made tea. She sipped half a cup and couldn't finish it. Her hands were shaking again. At noon, she asked me what time weddings usually start. Probably by now, I said. She nodded. That was it. Just a nod. She spent the rest of the afternoon looking out the window. Not crying. Not speaking. Just watching. Every car that drove past, she turned her head. Every door that creaked, her shoulders tensed, as if maybe, just maybe, he would change his mind and show up. But he didn't. He got married. Without his mother. Without his father. Without the two people who gave him everything they had, their time, their youth, their sacrifices. And we sat at home. Alone. I tried to distract her. I told her stories from when he was small, how he once tried to put sugar in the fuel tank because he thought cars needed sweet energy. She smiled a little. But not the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. Just a memory flickering in pain. Around 3 p.m. She asked me if I had eaten. I lied and said yes. Then she whispered something I will never forget. Do you think he'll regret it one day? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't want to lie again. That night, I helped her into bed. She was weaker than usual. Her skin felt cold. I pulled the blanket up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and said, "I'm proud of you." She looked surprised. And I told her, "You carried love with dignity today." Even when it wasn't returned. She reached out and held my hand. And we lay there, in the quiet, as the world celebrated a wedding we weren't invited to, while our own family quietly began to fall apart. That was the night I realized something: silence can be louder than any scream. And the absence of love can echo for a lifetime. The wedding had passed. The celebrations were done. Laughter echoed somewhere else, but not in our home. The house felt heavier after that day. As if the walls themselves were grieving. My wife, she didn't complain. Not once. But I could see it. The spark in her eyes had dimmed. She moved slower. Her voice was softer. And she started sleeping more, as if the world held nothing left for her when she was awake. I asked her, gently, if she was ready to tell him now. To call our son, tell him the truth, that she had been sick, long before the wedding. That she had hidden it just so he could have his big day without worry. She smiled. Tired. Faint. Then said, "Let him come back first. Let him settle. He just got married." Always putting him first. Even in her suffering. 3 days after the wedding, she didn't get out of bed. I brought her water. She barely sipped it. I brought her soup. She couldn't lift the spoon. Her breathing. It was thin, like a candle flickering before it goes out. I sat beside her and held her hand, the same hand I had held for over 30 years. That hand had raised children, held me through storms, wiped tears, and cooked thousands of meals without complaint. She looked at me and said, "Tell him I loved him. Even though he broke me." I told her no. I told her she would tell him when he came, when he finally realized what he had done. That he'd walk through the door and fall to his knees, begging for forgiveness. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned her head to the window. The light was golden that afternoon, like God had poured honey across the sky. Her lips moved just barely, and I leaned in to hear. She whispered his name. Once. Soft. Then she was gone. Just like that. No drama. No sound. Just peace. A peace she didn't get to feel while she was alive. I sat there frozen. My hand still wrapped around hers, as if holding her tightly enough could pull her back. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. It was like the grief was too big for tears. I kissed her forehead. It was already cool. And then I sat back, in the same chair, and looked at the ceiling. And I asked God, why? Why did the woman who gave everything have to leave with nothing? No goodbye from her son. No last dance at his wedding. Just silence. And me. She died with love in her heart, and pain in her chest that didn't come from her illness, but from being left behind by the very person she lived for. He came home 3 days after she passed. 3 days too late. I was sitting on the front porch when I saw his car pull in. My heart didn't leap. It didn't race. It just sat there, heavy in my chest like a stone that had forgotten how to beat. He stepped out of the car in his clean shirt, new wedding band flashing in the sun, and a spring in his step. He looked like a man ready to share joy. Then he saw my face, and the smile vanished. "Daddy," he said. "Where's Mummy?" I didn't answer. I just stood, and I let the silence do what words couldn't. He walked past me and into the house. I followed him, slow, steady, like a shadow. Then he called out, "Mummy." Once. Twice. He opened the bedroom door, still calling her name. Then he saw it, the empty bed. The neatly folded wrapper. The pillow still carrying the shape of her head. And on the table, the small journal she had written for him. I watched as his fingers trembled when he picked it up. Watched as he read the first few lines. "My darling son, I didn't tell you I was sick because I didn't want to ruin your joy. I was so proud of you. I still am. I only wanted to see you happy, even if it meant hiding my pain." His knees buckled. He sat on the floor. And for the first time in years, I saw my son cry like a baby. He wept into that journal, holding it to his chest like it could bring her back. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he asked. And I said, "Because she didn't want your wedding day to be a funeral in your heart." He looked at me, eyes swollen, voice cracking. "I told you both to stay away," he whispered. And I nodded. "Yes, son. You did." He broke. Right there on the floor. All the pride, all the self-importance, it melted under the weight of regret. And I stood there, not with anger, but with something worse. Grief. Because in that moment, he realized something most people never want to admit, that time doesn't wait. And love, once lost, cannot always be earned back. He buried his face in her pillow, like maybe he could still smell her scent. Still hear her humming in the kitchen. Still call her Mama and hear her say, "Yes, my son." But it was too late. She was gone. And all he had now was a house full of memories and a heart full of shame. After the funeral, the house was still. Quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that presses on your chest, not empty, but full. Full of things unsaid. Full of memories too painful to touch. He stayed with me that night, my son. Not in the guest room. No. He slept on her side of the bed, curled up like he was 7 years old again. Like somehow being close to her pillow would let him wake up in a world where she was still alive. He didn't speak much the next day. Just walked around the house in slow steps, touching things. Her scarf on the chair. Her shoes by the door. The plant she watered every morning. And then, he found the wedding cloth she had bought. Folded neatly. Unworn. With a little note pinned to it, "This was for your big day. Even if I don't get to wear it, I'm still your mother. Always." He broke again. But this time, I didn't comfort him. I let him sit with the pain. Because sometimes, regret is a sharper teacher than any word a father can speak. Later that week, I gave him the rest of her journal. She had written more than just a letter. She had written blessings for him, prayers, stories of his childhood, words she never got to say face to face. He read it all. Every page. With trembling hands and tears that didn't stop falling. And then, one night, he came to me. He knelt, like a man who had finally dropped his pride. He held my feet and cried, "Daddy, I was wrong." And I looked at him, this grown man who had once been a little boy in my arms, and I said, "Yes, son. You were. But you have a chance now not to fix the past, but to honor it." So I made him promise me 3 things. 1. To never speak of his mother without speaking of her strength. 2. To tell his children, when they come, the truth about the woman who died for their joy. 3. And to never again let ego come before love. He nodded. And I saw something shift in him. Something wake up. The next Sunday, he stood in church and told the whole congregation the story. Every painful part. He cried. They cried. And he ended with these words, "My mother taught me love. My pride cost me her presence. I will never make that mistake again." And from that day forward, I saw my son become a man, not just in age, but in heart. He visits now. Calls often. He even built a small garden in our backyard, with a bench and a stone that reads, "For Mama, who loved me when I didn't deserve it." And sometimes I sit there, alone in the evening, watching the sun dip low, and I whisper, "She died broken, but your love is rebuilding what you tore down." And in that moment, I smile. Because even in loss, love can still win.